understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.
Welcome to another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. We are here. This is our first live episode for 2026. Really excited to be here. I'm joined by Sophia Qureshi. How are you today, Sophia?
Yeah, I'm great, thank you. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful. Excited to be here. Excited to kick this year's show off. Today's title, Inside the AI Fraud War, the Battle for Digital Identity in 2026. Before we jump into the show, let me just do some housekeeping. We are currently streaming live from LinkedIn and YouTube. As of next week, we will strictly be streaming live only from YouTube. So I want to throw that out there. Now, when we jump into this topic, let me introduce my guest because we have a lot of questions for her and we're really excited to talk about today's episode. Sophia Qureshi leads the go-to-market strategy and operational planning across 4 global regions, aligning sales, product, and marketing on AI-driven decision solutions. She partners with executive and regional leaders to refine industry-specific GTM frameworks for fraud and onboarding and credit risk. With a background in computer science, Sophia combines deep technical knowledge with industry insights, offering a unique perspective on the intersection of fraud prevention, AI, and open banking. She is passionate about helping organizations navigate the challenges of increased digitization and regulatory shifts while optimizing risk strategies. Sophia is the Global Solutions GTM at Provenir. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
So, always interesting. I love it when we talk about the computer science background because I have myself
Yeah,
undergrad, strictly computer science, and how you're leveraging that in your current position. Just want to kind of talk about that.
yeah, absolutely. I think the way to sort of think about it is when you learn about computer science and systems, you look at the bigger picture, right? It's about what's happening upstream and downstream and all the connections within that. So I think that what that background has really given me is the ability to take that bigger picture and really understand the problem that we're trying to solve for the customer, whether that be for fraud or risk or any of the other types of areas that we look at, and also consider the other pieces that come into that. So, for example, data, people, processes, because these things are not operating in the silo, right? They are as part of an ecosystem. And I'll give you an example. So recently, a friend of mine had a bit of a telco fraud issue happen to him. So what happened was his account was taken over by some fraudsters, and they ordered some more new contracts, so new iPhone contracts for the brand new iPhone on his account. And I think that what happened is they had actually hacked into his Gmail, so they got access to his login details. And then these phones turned up at his house, delivered by Royal Mail. So it was in the UK, delivered by Royal Mail. And he was like, oh, that's weird. I didn't order these brand new iPhones. So he called up the mobile phone provider and they were like, well, you logged into your account and you ordered these. And it turned out to be this very sophisticated fraud organization who had colluded with Royal Mail and basically got these phones delivered, but actually the postman came back a couple of days later to collect them to give them to the fraudsters. So
Wow.
so we were absolutely shocked. But the thing, and how I'm sort of thinking about it is actually there's a lot of layers in that, and you need to think about the bigger picture and all of the different ecosystem elements within that, because it's not just the hack into the Gmail account, for example. It's not just that being the weakness. There's a number of different elements there, including he must have at some point authorized, through a text message, some kind of code, and he wouldn't have realized that it wasn't, the legit mobile operator who was sending him that code. So he must have done that with some kind of interception text message as well. So quite sophisticated fraud happening. And that would have been about £3,000 worth of loss on his account for those mobile phones, those brand new iPhones.
And when people look at that, they'll think, oh, 3,000 is not a big deal. But done over 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people, victims, it becomes a very big deal for the company, with the phone provider, and so forth.
Yep. And also sort of sorting it out in the background, right? Because it took hours to sort of figure out what's going on here. He wanted, that corrected on his account. They want to get the phones back. Like it takes a lot of effort from customer services as well. So that's also loss for that mobile phone operator as well.
No, absolutely. And I like what you said, right? With the computer science background, looking at it in terms of systems and all the different connected pieces, so very important. And I think from a technology background and having a similar background as yourself, I tend to take that for granted. And the only time I realize that it's different for people with that background is when I'm talking to someone who does not have that background. And I'm like, oh no, well, so how did they connect to the data? And they're looking at me like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, then I catch myself like, oh, okay. So I think because we've been doing it for a while and trained in that capacity, and it just so happens, right? Like at least, back in when I got into the field, when a lot of people were not thinking about technology, it wasn't as ubiquitous. So even though, and I started in the 90s, and it just didn't impact so many people's lives. Now the impact is greater. So everyone's dealing with some sort of fintech. They may not even call it fintech. They're like, look, this is how I get my money, and I have to do a peer-to-peer with a friend, and I have to set up an account. But they're not thinking in terms of how we would think about it. But now they're connecting to a server. They're using all of these different services throughout, like where's your data and things of that nature. And when we start thinking about it, we may look at it from a different lens. And after you just said that, I realized that. So that's pretty awesome how you're able to leverage that to what you're currently doing. Let's get into the topic, right? Like in looking at where fraud is right now, right, in 2026, what feels different than 2020 or over the last half decade?
Yeah. So I think for me, fraud is always evolving. Fraud
100%.
types, the sophistication of that fraud. But I think the real differentiator and what's happened over the last sort of 5 years or so is it's really professionalized. So it's scaled up, it's automated. It's no longer about those individual bad actors, right? It's almost like they're running a business. That's the sort of operations that are going on behind the scenes. It's kind of unbelievable. I don't know if you guys have a similar program. We have this program on TV, which is where some fraud detectives try to uncover different scams. It tends to be things like call center scamming, so where they're calling you and trying to get various details of social engineering, trying to get that information out of you. And when they uncover those things, and sometimes they sort of hack into those call centers CCTV so they can see how many people are working on this. It's literally offices of people in rows, like they've gone to work, right? And they are really sophisticated, really organized. And I think just the advancement of all of the technology, especially Gen AI, but even previous technology, has really accelerated that into that very organized, sophisticated, and professional operation.
No, I could totally see that. I mean, I read articles in which the same way you'll go to work at your 9 to 5 or 8 to 4, 8 to 5, it's a similar operation going on,
Mm,
but from a legal standpoint. And that's not even talking about, and that's just, criminal organizations. We're not even getting into like the nation state actors that they have certain sanctions against them. So fraud and online digital fraud is how they make a lot of their adds to their GDP, right? As that's their part of their gross domestic product, right? So is these types of networks. So it's highly sophisticated and so forth. And I even find it interesting because you look at situations like that and you have people getting into at a young age being promoted to computer science for that particular purpose, right?
mm,
Because we're moving in an age in which if you understand it and are doing it from a young age, you can take it to build great things, or you can take it to the total opposite direction to commit these types of acts. What you know why is digital identity in the center of the fraud conversation?
yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think that digital identity is necessarily the center, and that being new. So, in the sense of, from my perspective, I think digital identity and identity has always been at the forefront of what is a risk to any business or any new products and services that you might be taking out. And, I'm trying to think back to when I started working at Experian about 15, maybe 17 years ago. And identity, and therefore digital identity, was such a big topic. So I don't think that that's necessarily a new perspective. But what I do think that has changed, and I think you sort of alluded to it earlier, was the fact that so much is now riding on this. So if one piece of that authentication or verification goes wrong at the beginning, then all of a sudden you have access to so many new products and services, or your existing accounts and services, which are all now intertwined and linked, or all on your phone, multiple apps on your phone. So it just opens the door to a lot more risk, I suppose, for that individual or for businesses. Whereas before, those things were much more siloed, right? You could get access to maybe someone's online banking, but that wouldn't be the same way that you'd also access maybe their other details, and you'd have more steps to sort of go through to open new accounts. Whereas now, get hold of one person's phone and you've pretty much got their 10 bank accounts, maybe their open bank, some of them might be linked by open banking. You've got their Gmail account, you've got all of their private social media accounts. It could all be, all of a sudden, with this digital identity, you could have unlocked all of that. And I think that, for me, that's probably the real shift there. But identity as a concept and protecting identity has always been a topic. I mean, I think I wrote about it actually in my computer science undergraduate degree, identity and identity part, one of the
Nice.
topics. So that was well over 20 years ago. So yeah, I think it's more about the shift in the interconnectedness of it all now.
It's an interesting point. I mean, look, identity theft has been going on for. I mean, I was a victim of identity theft in 1999, 8. I
Mm,
mean, was not sophisticated. I mean, he physically got my wallet because I
yeah,
dropped it somewhere and they
yeah,
went to town. So totally agree with you on that, right? That identity aspect. Um, but now with on the digital side, right? Because like I was in preparing for the show, right? The concept of like synthetic identities
yeah,
and creating these personas and so forth. You
yeah,
know, just find it interesting how the evolution of it. I
yeah, yeah.
I read something I wanted to share with you that I found really interesting. We can like jump into it. It was most fraud losses now occur before an account is fully established.
Mm.
What are your thoughts around that?
That's pretty scary, but probably very accurate. Yeah. Um, I think, the account opening point is one of the highest risk points in the customer journey. So you are trying to assess what's going on. You don't have much history about that particular individual. You have pressure to open the account as quickly as possible. Like the expectation from customers is completely different now. I would, go online and try to create a new account and expect it to be open instantly. I'd want to either move money into it or at least be able to understand how much credit I could get pretty much instantly once I've completed that application. So the business is automatic, like already at risk, right, at that point, um, of losses. And maybe they haven't completed all of their due diligence and checks yet. Some of them might be still happening in the background. They're kind of CDD, EDD checks, for example. Um, and yet the account is open and they may even have a line of credit at that point. So yeah, I think it's scary, but I do think it sort of provides an opportunity to think about how we can maybe do things differently, how we can ensure that we are able to provide a risk-based approach. So you don't want to go over the top and provide and put in place so much friction that a customer's not going to be able to open an account or going to go and open the account somewhere else because it took too long or too many checks. So yeah, I think it's a point of reflection and ensuring that the right sort of strategies are being in place. But it is scary. Yeah,
Yeah, because like if you combine like some of the fake personas with some real information and create the synthetic ID,
yeah,
the from a an app perspective, the person you thought that was opening the account is not really a real person.
yeah,
It's
absolutely.
just part by a ring. So
Yeah,
now, you created this account for this fake persona,
yeah,
and now, once they're in your system, that's a whole nother set of issues. And and especially if in some of these, especially in our business of fintech, they may give certain promotions, right? Opening up an account, get this bonus,
yeah,
something to that nature. And losses can now become, over time that becomes a lot. And like to what you're saying, right? From a I've discussed this a lot on the show. From a startup perspective, right? Your fuel or your users. So you want to say, we have this amount of monthly active users, this is amount of daily active users. So to your point, right? You don't want to create friction.
mm,
What is that fine line?
mm.
What are your thoughts on that fine line?
I mean, just before we go on to that bit, I think you know even just thinking about generating some of those synthetic IDs, it's not necessarily that that didn't happen in the past, right? But it's the volume that is happening.
Mhm.
So even more of a threat, right? So I think in terms of sort of designing a system and strategies against this increasing threat, the volumes, the sophistication, the quality of some of those identity documents that are now being produced, that's very hard to determine whether or not they are fake or genuine, right? And also, I think the other element of it is the fact that because fraudsters now have at the touch of their hands all of the Gen AI technology as well as agentic AI, so they can automate some of these processes. The threat is also around your strategies, because what they can do, exactly how you test and simulate and champion challenge your own strategies, they are doing that in the background to see where the weakness is. So they will try out different routes. So really this is about, again, going back to that kind of computer science approach, I think, and looking holistically at the whole system from all the way upstream, downstream, what's going on, the systems, the people. Don't forget the people, because that's always an entry of weakness, and the processes, and trying to take a holistic approach and use really, really good principles, right? So ensure you've got as much data as possible that's available to you from different angles at that moment in time, not just looking at that application data, but can we look at some of the device information? Can we look at the behavioral? Have we got any historical information? Can we profile on any of those pieces? Are there any links? Those types of things. And then also looking at other signals that might be useful. So maybe we want to look at some of the credit risk information as well at the same time as looking at the fraud details, because you're opening an account, that might indicate something else. And also being able to use some of the more sophisticated type algorithms to surface some of those risks, identifying the links that maybe were a little bit trickier to do in real time before. So there's some newer technology around network analysis and connections and links that we had before. We've had it for about 20 years or so, but it was something that took a long time to run. You'd have to run it in batch. It'd typically be done overnight. So now the technology is there to do that in real time. So it's about combining all of these things together and taking that holistic approach. And I think that, you know, that's the approach that we need to take. But we also need to make sure that we're, as much as possible, providing best practice for this network of people, right? How can we educate people? How can we share this knowledge and work together against the fraudsters?
Are there frameworks that you would recommend for that? Because, you know, that's the beautiful things about certain frameworks. It's like, all right, here's the general idea and best practice you should use. How you implement it, right? Totally negotiable of how you feel, what technology you can use, but it provides. I like it for security because it provides a roadmap, especially when an organization might not be as mature in that domain.
Yeah, absolutely. There are frameworks for different types of fraud. So you might want to look at it. You've got application fraud. You might want to look at the first party, the third party, and mule type frauds. Then you've got further down the customer journey, you might want to look at the payments information, what's happening on all the logins and interactions that are happening. You might want to look at the online transactions as well. And then you've got any other kind of account opening or additional products and services that are taken out, and the links and the networks between those as well. So as you go through the customer journey, there are different types of fraud and different types of risk. And so there are frameworks around how to build strategies around each of those. And, you know, there are lots of people who can help with advisory around that, and sort of thinking about the different MOs and thinking about the different types of data that you can use to, I guess, verify and validate the information. And then also the kind of strategies that you want to put in place. So you don't want to take the same strategy for each of your different products, regions, lines of business. You may want to segment those depending on the risk, the risk to you, the risk to the customer, the types of maybe other products and services that may open up, for example. So you need to take a risk-based approach, because if you're going to layer all of that onto everything, you'll go back to the problem about the friction again. And then fraud becomes this concept of, blocking growth and blocking revenue, which is not where we want to be. We want to be in a position where fraud is helping businesses, or fraud strategies are helping businesses to grow and have that at the forefront of their mind when they're building those strategies.
I mean, all of the things that you said, I want to jump into the fraud being helping businesses to grow. Before I jump into that, you mentioned, I like the concept of what you were mentioning in terms of when you're adding these various security gates, right? From the network side, how you said, okay, it used to be done in batches, but now it could be done in real time. Can you explain that technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess what I'm talking about in a little bit more detail is called network analysis. So in the old days, I'm talking about kind of 10 years or so ago, we would do network analysis and link analysis, which would be something like, I want to know if I've, like, let's say I've got the name, address, the date of birth, the phone number, and the email address for an individual applicant. I want to know if anywhere else in my database, have I got any links to any of those other entities? So, for example, have I seen that email address before? Have I seen that address before, right? And then what the next part is, so that's the link. Then the next part is, I want to know, well, are there any other links to that? So have they reused that email address somewhere else, right? Has there been another application that's come through with the same email address? Or tends to be phone number is reused, right? Because it's quite hard to keep generating new mobile phone numbers. So links to that. But you might do a soft link as well. So you might say it's not exactly the same email address, but it's similar. It's a similar pattern email address. So that could also be a soft link. So you would build those up, and typically that technology would build those links. It would take a long time to run, about 8 hours or so, because it's computationally heavy. And then it would, the next day you'd come in and you'd surface all of those links, and then you'd work through them. Now there's graph ML technology, which is like a graph database type technology. And you can just literally load all of those into there and run your analysis in real time just across that database, because of the way it's being stored and the way the links are generated. And so therefore you can do that kind of analysis at the point of the application opening, rather than overnight and come in the next day and decide. So that facilitates this concept of the customer expecting that account to be opened immediately and being able to use it, but also you're covering yourself because you've done all the extensive checks in real time.
Got it. I got it. Totally understand. And
It's
when you
databases, basically, that was a newer technology that came out. We used to use relational databases for the same problem.
No, totally understandable. Thank you for explaining that. And the question I have right now, leveraging fraud as part of your strategy to grow. You help
Yes.
me understand.
Yeah. It's a really great topic, this one. And we had a session over in Kansas City, I think it was about 6 months or so, where we invited all of our existing customers to talk about this topic. And we tried to frame fraud from the other side of the coin, which is, how can we make sure that we're accepting all the great customers and not putting in place too many hurdles by which customers would either get declined where they were a genuine customer, or there was so much friction that they fall out of the process, right? and trying to look at it from the perspective of economics, which is what was the opportunity lost. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to help our customers, our existing customers, to calculate the opportunity loss by thinking about it as in, well, how much is that customer worth to me? So what's the average customer lifetime value of that individual? How much you'd look at it like what products and services might they potentially take, the average of that over a period of time that you expect them to be with you, and really trying to understand, okay, well, if we could improve our fraud detection and reduce our false positive rates by even a small amount, that would really help with this opportunity loss piece, and trying to think about it as these are all potential additional revenue gains that you can get by really focusing on your fraud strategy and how you can tune that last piece, which is it's usually the false positive piece, but there's also the friction piece as well.
Got it. No, it's one to understand it. You used to use a similar concept when I was consulting as from a security standpoint, and saying, leveraging security as part of your sales strategy. And I was curious to how your thought process with the fraud, and the way we used to say it was, by the time you get to the point of due diligence, right? You pretty much you're really close to this sale. They really want to now figure out, are you the right fit? Are you going to be their weakest link? So at that point, as opposed to waiting for the questions to be asked, the same way you advertised your features, right? Let's start being forthcoming and talking about our security practices, right?
Mm,
Uh,
mm,
What process with that was, if we can start detailing our security practices, answer questions that they had without
mm,
them asking us, and answer questions they didn't even know they were not even thinking about,
yeah,
that tended, at times, in my experience, especially on the fintech side, in trying to, I wasn't selling security per se, we were selling a fintech solution,
yeah,
but in that process, right, it increased their confidence. And what I learned with that is, if you are forthcoming and answer these questions before they even have it, and then you start volunteering new information, the increase in confidence is so much, they
mm,
tend to ask less questions. So
mm,
in partnering with the sales side, I found that to be a good strategy. So when you said fraud to grow, I was just curious, because I saw some similarities there, but I
mm,
totally understand how you're leveraging it. So thank you for that, because it kind of helps me expand that picture.
yeah.
Um,
I think on your point, really, that for me is always about education, right? If people understand more, then they tend to engage and you tend to get a better result out of that. So yeah, I can see how that could be really, really helpful, and I might be stealing that idea as well.
oh, it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. Uh, we were talking about it, we touched on it, but we didn't dive into it. The AI war, right?
Mm,
Like AI versus AI.
yeah,
And can we really jump into that? Because I mean, we touched on it, right? But because you
yeah,
were saying, right, we have situations where on the fintech side they have AI, but now on the threat actor side they have AI. So it's
yeah,
like he's AI are battling each other. Can we
yeah,
jump into that and talk about that in terms of what you're seeing in the industry and with your customers?
yeah, absolutely. So let's start with the threats then, right? So from a fraudster's perspective, um, and I think I mentioned this before, a lot of the fraud types and behaviors haven't necessarily changed, right? So there's still threat at application, there's still a threat that might happen from online payments, any sort of transactions, any new account openings, any new products and services. So those are the sort of risk points, and there are known modus operandi of how they typically break those systems and get through. But what AI has brought to them, and more focused around the Gen AI piece, so the ability to create new content, be that images, be that voice, be that video, is the ability to do everything on steroids. So it's like, okay, well, in the past, they would literally pick up a phone and call someone physically and try to get information out of them. Social engineering, right? That concept hasn't changed, but now they don't even have to do that. They could write a few scripts, or maybe they don't even write the scripts. Maybe the AI content writes the script, and then they can automate those calls with different voices, different accents, different languages. It's just absolutely ridiculous, right? So all of a sudden, all of the hurdles that they had before, poor spelling, weird accents that would trigger the human to think, oh, that doesn't sound like my bank, doesn't sound like my friend, or whoever I'm expecting it to be, bad grammar, all of that kind of stuff that would normally flag for a human to say, oh, this feels a bit dodgy. I mean, all of that they can pretty much get around all of that with Gen AI assisting them. So that's one part of it. And the other part to Gen AI is the sophistication of how well it can mimic different personas and tailor the content to appeal to different types of people. So if they are very advanced, they'll understand that if you use one of those GPT platforms, you will be able to take the same email message and tailor it, let's say, for a CEO or maybe for a junior member of staff, and that will appeal to them more and give them a higher chance of maybe clicking on it or responding to it or actioning it. So I think all of those things have made it, the scale has increased, and then the sophistication and just even the detection is a lot harder. Then you've got agentic AI, which is bringing in this concept. And we always had a concept of automation, right? That computers were invented to help us automate and make things easier. So there was always that concept, but someone in the background had to code all of those pieces. And I know, you can appreciate how much effort it probably took to write the code, to test the code, to make sure it follows those steps and processes. Whereas now you could type, okay, open this document. I want you to then send this into this website. I need you to fill out the form with these details that that the AI has generated through Gen AI. I need you to then upload the document. I mean, it's going to do it automatically, and they didn't have to write any code. They just wrote in English or whatever language they prefer. So that just takes it to a completely different scale in terms of, it's supersizing it. And even things like generating new websites. So I remember going to speak to RBS a couple of, maybe 5 years ago or so, and they said they have teams of people trying to make sure, that's RBS NatWest, which is a big tier 1 bank in the UK, and they have teams of people trying to make sure that they bring down all the fake websites for all of their online, all the online bank fake websites, right? And now it's just gone on steroids because they just can't do it quick enough, because they can just copy the images, the graphics, the HTML, it's all up there. They didn't have to code it.
And it just has to be off by one letter.
Well,
That's
yeah, I mean, you wouldn't even notice though, would you? Because if you were trying to log in, I'm not going to go and check every piece of text. I'm just seeing, does it look like it's my NatWest logo? Yeah, let's log in.
so, and then and it's funny you mentioned that. So now you get this email, right? Scary email. Your account's been compromised. You
Mm,
need to log into your account
you can log in.
immediately.
Yeah,
Here's the link. The logo looks great, right? Everything looks in line.
yeah,
And all you have to do is click that link.
yeah.
And
And
once
fill
you
in your
click that,
details.
and the sad thing about it is once you click that link, even if you don't log in, you don't know what's downloading on your
Yeah,
laptop behind the scenes or your phone behind the scenes.
yeah,
That becomes scary for the individual. And I know, like, I mean, even to your point, right? What happened if something happened via text or someone called and it seems so real.
yeah,
Myself, I'm like, no, no, you would never call me. It wouldn't happen like this. And
yeah,
I was, and I was from a standpoint where I was more fascinated. I was less upset about the scam, but became fascinated about the technique because I wanted to kind of see how
yeah,
far this go. And in my head, I was just, after a while, I just hung up. But in my head, I was like, wow, this is not bad. Like,
yeah,
I can see someone falling for this.
yeah.
So
Especially if you're in a rush, right? You're just trying to get through your day and someone's called you or you've got sent an email, you're just like, right, I'll just get it done off the list. And yeah, this is how they sort of trap you because they know you're in a rush. They know you're not checking everything, every little detail. If you had hours to ponder over it, maybe you might identify that something was spelt wrong. It was this, or it was asked in a certain way. But they know people are still rushing around. They send it at a specific time as
then,
well.
so that's another point with the AI versus AI. So on the threat side, if you're in London, for instance, right?
Hmm.
So I might target a certain time in
Yeah,
that time zone versus on the US side, like around an EST New York time zone. Like,
yeah,
okay, maybe I might want this person when they're on their way to work, right?
absolutely.
Because they're dealing with a commuting, they have to get in, they have other priorities. This comes in, they may want to just, I want to deal with this thing quick, get it out the way, because obviously, if your account's compromised, it's not something that you want to wait all day to fix. But if you have conflicting priorities, you may not be as detailed oriented to solve that one.
Yeah,
And you know, once that once you go down that rabbit hole and they get your information, my goodness, it becomes a problem for the individual. Like your friend that you mentioned earlier in the
yeah,
show with Telcom,
yeah,
because who knows that initial entry, how that happened. He
yeah,
might not even remember how that happened.
yeah,
So, that's the scary part. So now if we're talking about on the one side AI, now we
yeah,
have the other side from the fintech. How does that work?
yeah. Yeah, so obviously, both sides have access to the same kind of technology. So how can we use this? How can we take the opportunity to use some of the technology to help us, right? And to build better strategies and to build more watertight strategies. So some of the things that we've been testing out, and I know a lot of other fintechs are doing as well, is looking at, okay, so for example, with the scam emails, for example, so can we use some of the Gen AI or GPT technology to identify whether or not this is a high possibility of it being an automated email, so something that's not been written by a human. And it's actually really good at detecting that because it sort of knows its own patterns and it also knows how humans write emails. So it has an ability to, find some signals within there to be able to do that detection. And the great thing is, so in the past, we would have been able to do something similar. However, we would have needed hundreds of email examples of good emails, and then, at least 100 to 200 scam emails for our sample. And we would have put that through a machine learning model, done a whole load of regression on it, and produced a risk-based model at the end, a predictive model at the end of it. But we would have needed all of that history to go through, and we would have had to do all of the training and learning. And we didn't have 100 scam emails, right? You might have one or two in your hand to sample. So the great thing about Gen AI is that because it's already been trained with a lot of information, it really understands human behavior, and it really understands how humans write and talk to each other. It can do a lot of that automatically. Now, one caveat around that is, like, as the technology progresses, it may become harder and harder to differentiate. So I think it's pretty good right now, but the better the Gen AI gets, the more hard it is going to be to really differentiate. And that's the same with the image detection pieces. So there's technology that you can use to look at whether or not that image. So for example, when you're looking at your passport, usually you're asking for a photo of your passport. If it's a fake document, typically that won't have the same shadow, glares, reflection pieces on there. So again, you can use kind of signals to identify actually that document looks too clean and it doesn't have any reflection on it. It's not bouncing in the way it should do. So you can risk it as a higher risk. But again, as the technology moves forward and the quality of the fake documents gets better, that's when it's going to be harder to detect. And the same with the video ones as well. So account openings, sometimes they're asking for video selfies. Some of those are so good, you wouldn't tell it's not human. It's not even a real person. Like, that person never existed. It was a fake image of a person generated, and then they've made a video out of it as well. So it's actually incredible. If people are interested in finding out more about that, we can maybe put some links on our website, or we can send you some of those details. But yeah, we've seen some video selfies that have been so realistic that we were like, wow. And you see them on YouTube and TikTok, right?
Of course. And that's like an interesting thing. So I'm gonna give you an analogy from one of my things that I do around jujitsu. So grappling, right? So I've been doing it for a while. One of my favorite things to do outside of work or whatever. My coach said something really interesting. It kind of is on the same line, right? Because you're going to go out to a competition, and he was like saying, at a certain level, the person you're facing, they know all the moves. Like, the moves, they know the moves. So they know everything you're about to do. You know everything they're about to do. And what it starts to come down to win are those intangibles, right? How's your nutrition? How's your sleep? How's your work? So if you're going against someone, look, in a grappling jiu-jitsu tournament, look, I want to get you to a point you're going to tap out. And you want to do the same to me. There are certain things that we have to do to accomplish that goal, whether it's a joint manipulation, whether it's loss of blood flow to the brain, whether it's something around that line. Point is, I know you want to do that, and when you're trying to do that, I know what you're going to do similar, right? Now, assuming both parties are on a similar level, right?
Yeah.
So with what you're describing now, right? The bad actor has the technology, the business has the technology, the same AI technology, and we kind of know, okay, we get it. Like my coach said, what are those intangibles for the business? From your thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we always have to go back to there's technology and it can help us, but it's not the single answer. So we can use technology in different ways, all of the different algorithms and techniques and, approaches. And we should try to build that in a multi-layered. Someone once said to me, it's like an onion. It's like different layers in order to make sure that you're watertight. And at some point, one of those layers will catch out the fraudster. It won't be one thing on its own necessarily. It'll be like a sequence of pieces that they will have had to have done, and they just won't have that detail, or they'll make a mistake, or there'll be a link somewhere to a reused piece of information or a reused document, and then that will flag. So an example would be with those fake documents, what we've seen with one of our customers is that the fraudsters got a bit lazy and they used the same photo, the fake photo, on a number of different applications. And it's only recently we have technology to do image recognition, like in real time. So in the past, those photos would have had to have been looked at by a real human, right? So eventually they'll see those applications, they'll go, oh, that's the same face that I saw on the one before and the same face that I saw on the one before that. So, okay, they would have caught it, but they would have caught it like a week later in the investigation part. But it's about, okay, how can we bring some of that tech earlier? Because we have it, we can do image recognition now, we can look at those bits. So we need to make it watertight. It needs to be about layers of onions and checking at each stage, where are the weak points? What can we put in place? How can we bring in checks earlier into the process rather than some of the ones that are later and a bit more manual? And, building that robust approach. But that's really it. It's about taking a very practical and common sense approach to it and making sure we're thinking about all of the different pieces. And again, going back to where the weaknesses could be, people, again, things between different channels. So when you go from in branch to online or mobile, and having different pieces of information as well. So are they corroborated? And then, old systems and new systems. So making sure that all the information is being sent to all of the systems and they have access to it. So you'd be surprised at how many tier one banks, they have the data, but they cannot use it because one system is over here, it's managed by this team, and they just, they don't have the time with IT to get that data into this system, which is the fraud system or the credit risk system. So, some simple things can sometimes be the way to make it more watertight.
Because what you described in terms of the layer from a cybersecurity perspective, we just call it security in depth, right? So it's like how many different modes are we putting into security? So you just can't just rely on passwords. Maybe it's your MFA, then it's your finger. So it's like all these different layered approach to what you described. So totally agree. And you know what? And I had some other questions. Well, I have another. I loved ending it in that way because I think that was such a cool. The way you brought that back was such a cool ending. But can you describe before we close? You mentioned a mule network before. Can you describe that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So think about a mule network or mule accounts as accounts that are either opened or they are now taken over in order to be used to move money. It tends to be for the proceeds of crime in some way, shape, or form. And it tends to be in order to create layers between the original account holder, where the money has come into, and where it's going to be exited from. So you want to have as many steps between the original money and where you're going to exit it in order to separate yourself from where those funds have come from. and make it really difficult for financial institutions to trace back. So those steps might, ideally, those mule accounts would be at different banks, different countries, different types of financial products. So you might switch between bank accounts to insurance premiums to life insurance and things like that. But you're basically using those financial instruments as a way to move that money or to transfer the money and then effectively clean it or distance yourself from it. And the thing with account opening is you do need to do some kind of risk assessment around that. So when an account is opened, the bank or financial institution needs to understand, okay, is this a high risk of being used for a mule account? So tends to be students who might be getting paid some money, or especially international students. So maybe they're leaving the country anyway, so they've been asked. How it used to happen is people would hang outside the university and say, hey, do you want £50 for your bank account? You set up a new bank account, and then they're going to leave the country anyway because they've finished their university degree or whatever, or they're a student and they're desperate for the money. It's that kind of thing. But it could also be other victims. So for example, elderly people who don't realize what's going on, right? So high risk, they would be categorized as high risk. But at that point in time, you don't have enough information to know for sure. So you're not going to shut down the account at that moment in the account opening. You're going to monitor it. And you're going to want to know what's going on over a period of time, over that life cycle of that account, what money's coming in and out, where it's come from, and then, if there's anything suspicious that's going on as well.
Thank you for that. It's a really great explanation on it. I'm happy you gave that detail. Appreciate it. What we do at the conclusion of our show, I'm going to get off the stage and I'm going to give you some time to talk about how people can find you, your company, whatever you want to talk about, and so forth. So I'll give you that moment to do that right now.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I guess from just a bit of a summary, so if you liked some of the pieces that we talked about today and you want to find out a little bit more, then please either contact us through LinkedIn. So you can either contact myself or you can come to our website, provenir.com. And I'll just give a quick background about who Provenir is. So Provenir is a leading platform provider for enterprise companies, providing risk and decision intelligence platforms. And it does this by analyzing and providing accurate decisions and executing them in real time at scale, monitoring those decisions and monitoring the key performance indicators, and then helping customers to understand how to optimize those decisions and strategies so that they can get the business outcomes that they want. So typically we're talking about improving those acceptance rates, reducing the friction, increasing the fraud detection, reducing false positives, those types of things. So if you want to find out more, then please do contact us and we'd be happy to go through any of those points in more detail.
Thank you very much. I put the website on the video, so it should be there now for its entirety for future. Sophia, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciated the discussion. To the audience, real quick, if you have not done so, definitely do yourself a favor, subscribe to our newsletter. It's free. It keeps you on the pulse of FinTech, and also our upcoming guests is at the techbehindfintech.com/subscribe. So definitely do that. We have a line of exciting guests like Sophia with some hot topics we'll be discussing this year. So you want to stay in the know. As I always say, thank you very much for your viewership. To our viewers, we really appreciate it. Whether you're watching the show live, you're watching it tomorrow or next year, we definitely appreciate you. Been 6th year at it, so definitely we thank you. Once again, every Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be going live. Moving forward to my LinkedIn people, we'll still be sending LinkedIn invites, but we want to consolidate, and so you can watch it on one platform, and that platform we decided will be YouTube. So you'll be getting links as always and be invited to the events, but stay tuned. We're really excited about this year. Once again, Sophia, it was an excellent conversation. Definitely appreciated your time today, and it was wonderful meeting you. You have enjoy your weekend. I know it's like going 6 p.m. there, right?
Yeah, it's I'm finally getting to the weekend, but it's been an absolute pleasure. Really, really, really great conversation. So thank you very much.
Cheers. Really appreciate it. And to all, catch you next time. Take care.
Understanding the technology that powers the money is essential. Knowing the business drivers that inspire how the money is made is crucial. Bridging the gap between the mind of the technologist and the mind of the business is monumental. That is what TBF is all about. Let's start this never-ending conversation. It's time.